okay? So long before they had matches, before they had flint and steel, some cave tribe figured this out and passed it along. And basically, it's making a fire using friction, okay? So if you ever like climb a rope and slide down the rope fast and it hurt because it got hot, right? So friction causes heat. You make enough friction and enough heat and give it something that can catch fire and it'll go, okay? It's a nice concept, but it's actually harder than it might seem to actually get it all the way to a fire, okay? But if you have it set up properly, it's really not overly difficult to do, okay? And basically, this method consists of a bow, okay? But instead of being a big bow that shoots arrows, okay, it's a bow with a piece of line on it. This is paracord here, okay? I actually made this line, I was showing them over there, out of deer sinew, okay? So on the back strap of a deer, there's a membrane. You let it dry out, you can pull it into fibers and twist them and make rope that looks store-bought out of it. It's every bit as strong as store-bought, okay? So I just had it in my head that I wanted to make a bow drill kit out of total scratch with no man-made articles to it. I don't use this one all that much because it wears the string out. So I've maybe made like 4 or 5 fires with this one. But usually I use this one here. It just, the string holds up better and it doesn't take much time to put a new one on. It takes forever to make one of those. So it consists of a number of things. So it is the bow, the spindle, a baseboard, and then you need something to hold the top of the spindle, okay? Now this is my own little twist. I live up in Massachusetts, and I decided that this would be my own little twist on how to hold the spindle down. Usually you'll see somebody with either a rock or another piece of wood that they've scooped out a little area, okay, to hold the spindle down. But I had the idea of using clamshells, okay? And I found out pretty quick you can't use one clamshell because your hand will fry, okay? So you just use 2 clamshells, okay? And that gives enough space so the heat doesn't make it all the way to your hand, okay? So basically what's happening, I think I got one more, I guess. What's gonna happen is you want this thing spinning back and forth fast on the board. And you may have even seen people in the movies and so forth do it with their hands, okay? That might be the next step for me. I've not even tried it, never mind achieved that, okay? But basically you want this spindle rotating back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, okay? And forever, nobody really explained it to me, really what's catching fire. I always thought that it would just burst into flame or that you had to have a little bit of flammable stuff down there to catch. That's not what's going on, okay? What's going on is this thing rotates back and forth fast and you're pushing on it, okay? The bow is making it spin back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what it does is it makes sawdust. I mean, tiny little sawdust. And that sawdust builds up in this hole, okay? And this little V here gives the sawdust a place to go, okay? So what's happening, you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's getting hotter, hotter, more and more sawdust, okay? It's building more and more. You start building a little pile of sawdust. Then you're going to start to see smoke, okay? Because now it's not just making sawdust, it's getting hot. And eventually it gets hot enough that these little bits of sawdust catch fire, okay? And I know smoking isn't as common as it was, but when I grew up, both my parents smoked, okay? And you see somebody inhale on a cigarette and it glows, right? And then they're not inhaling on it and it's just smoldering, okay? And then when you inhale on it, it glows. And I'm not telling you guys to smoke, I don't. I'm just telling you the concept of smoldering small things, okay? and how when you give it air, it gets hotter. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to work this back and forth fast enough, okay? And I've found if I'm doing it right, and again, different people have different things that work for them, it takes about 80 strokes of this thing. That's how I just keep my head. Sometimes it's really smoking, and you think it's going to work, and I'll stop at like 60, and I go, I'm good, okay? Well, if I stop at 60, about at least half the time, it's not gonna keep going, okay? So 80's good, 100's even better, and you can have 2 people on it too. You can do it one person, but you can also have one person on either side of the bow. You'll be surprised that you get tired, okay? The other thing that you're gonna fight, if you ever try to do this, is this thing likes to pop out, okay? So when you're running it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it really wants to pop out. So you have to keep it down with this. And the trick is to give it enough pressure so that it's continuing to make smoke. But if you put too much pressure on it, you're not going to be able to rotate it anymore. So it's kind of like riding a bike. It takes a little bit of time to get the whole coordination down, where you're pushing down hard enough, you're running it back and forth fast enough, and it doesn't pop out. It's probably going to pop out on me a little bit. One thing I did when I first started doing this, I would just have a shallow depression in here that I carved out with my knife. I cheated a little bit on this one, and I took a drill, one of those wood bore drills with the point on it, and I snapped the point off, and if you make the point, it comes out the bottom, and I just drilled a little hole and just a depression in there. It just holds the spindle a little bit better, okay? So this baseboard is cedar. It's a cedar that came out of a tree in my yard, okay? And you want it to be dry, okay? The enemy of fire is water, right? So humidity in the air can be a problem. If this isn't dry wood, it can be a problem. And this spindle wants to be something that's soft, because you want it to make powder as it goes back and forth. And if it's really hard, it's not going to want to make the sawdust. So it wants to be soft, but not resinous. Okay, so just a quiz here, okay? What's a soft wood that grows around here? Any kind of, I don't mean a specific, like exact kind of tree, but a general kind of tree. What kind of trees have softer wood? All right, let's flip it around. What kind of trees have hard wood?
Oak.
Oak, okay? Oak would be one of the trees that has hardwood, okay? And in general, on the other end of the spectrum, okay, and you don't want to burn it in your fireplace. I don't know if any of you guys have a fireplace, but in general, you don't want to burn what kind of wood in your fireplace indoors. Does anybody know? Cedar or any of the pines, okay? Because the pines have resin in them, okay? It has like a turpentine. You ever see like pine sap come out, gets on your hand? Okay, you don't see that in an oak tree, okay? And that pine sap, even though it can be flammable and be a good thing, it lubricates this when it goes back and forth, and it makes it so it doesn't do what it's supposed to. Although I've been told you can use white pine and it'll work. I haven't tried it. So this is kind of a special wood. It's yucca. I didn't even know we had it, but I found out I always called them dagger plants in my parents' yard, but it looks like a little palm tree growing, okay? And it has one stalk that comes up with flowers on it. And they're not native around here, but a lot of people have them. You see them in cemeteries a lot and places like that. And there'll be like little white flowers on them. And when they die, there's one stalk left. When I was a kid, I used to make arrows out of them, or homemade bow and arrows, because they're relatively straight. But it's really good for this, okay? And if later on you guys need some, I can always give them to Mr. Pringle. I've got a whole ton of them sitting in my garage drying out. So, any questions? You guys want me to get started, or what?
Get started.
All right, let's go give it a try here. Okay. Another good wood for this, by the way, this is cottonwood. Cottonwood is another soft wood that doesn't have resin, but I don't have that many cottonwood trees around here, so I don't have a whole lot of it, but I do have some. All right, we're gonna go try it over there and see if, hopefully I don't smoke up the building. Too bad. I'm gonna try it near the fireplace. Somebody grab a piece of paper. Teaching people to do this because I'm left-handed, so everything's flipped around when everybody else wants to do it. So I'm going to do it left-handed. Now, the last thing that I didn't tell you about that you need is great. I'm not going to use this to burn. All I want from this is to catch the coal, okay? So when I get my little coal built up, like I told you, if I didn't have this, I have no way to pick it up and do anything with it, okay? So the one thing that I forgot to tell you about is tinder, okay? And there's probably 8 million tinders out there that you can come up with, but I've tried grass clippings, I've tried cotton, I've tried leaves, birch bark, and all of those kind of work, but the thing that really works is cedar bark, okay? If you have any cedar trees growing around, you'll notice there's like stringy bark on the side, and the birds make their nests out of it. They'll pull off little strings and make nests out of it. So what I do is I just take like it's not a rake, but just it's actually a pair of tongs that I have and it's got like just little grooves on it, and you run the grooves down the wood, and it makes like little fibers on it, and these make really flammable little fibers. Okay, so what we're after here is to get a coal, and what I'm going to do when we get the coal is I'm going to put it in this. Okay, and once we do that, hopefully I get a coal. You always see on the shows, they go like this, and they blow on it, okay? I don't have a lot of luck blowing on it. I have made it get a fire blowing on it, but there are two things that happen when you blow on it versus what I'm gonna tell you my method is. One, it blows it apart sometimes. If you blow on it too hard, the coal comes apart and it fractures, okay? And then it might not do what you want it to do. It's gonna be harder to do it. The other is, your breath is loaded with moisture. You're putting like the most moist air you could find in the area right on it. So what I do instead is I put it in here and just let it go, and then you'll see. I just run it back and forth until it goes. All right, so let's see if I can back up my words with action here, okay? So I just want to pick the right spindle. I think this is going to be the best one. That's another thing. It's a little bit of trial and error getting the right tension on this, okay? Because this doesn't really bend all that much. If you get one that's too noodly, it won't grab it hard enough and it won't spin it, okay? If you get one that's too strong, it won't bend and you won't be able to do this. So there's a little bit of experimenting that goes on in this. Okay, so I've got my two shells. I'm gonna put it on here, and we're gonna go back and forth.
Smoke this on. Mm-hmm. I can see it now.
Alright, now we got coal. Alright, so you just let it mature a little bit. You don't have to get right on it. When I first did this, I thought, oh, you gotta hurry up, it's gonna go out, it's gonna go out. There's plenty of fuel there for that thing, okay? See how it's smoking on its own? So what you do, usually I use like a pine cone or something. Just a little something to, see how the coal's orange?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna get it here. Drop it in. This also gives me a chance to catch my breath. All right, so you just let it set. And it's heating those fibers right now, okay? And once it's had a chance, this is how I do it. Just give it the air.
Or sometimes you can use a paper plate.
And once it gets going, you can give it a little more. Come on now. Give me fire. Here we go.
Look at that.
And you throw it in your campfire.
That's burning there.
Yeah.
And then you make your fire. That's cool.
So it does work.